The guardian at the bus stop. Have you ever noticed how the most profound moments often arrive quietly, wrapped in ordinary circumstances? Mine came on a bitter January morning, when a pair of amber eyes locked with mine through falling snow, and a silent promise passed between us that would change countless lives. The snowflakes were relentless, thick and wet, clinging to everything they touched as I pulled into the school parking lot. It was 6:45 a.m. in Chicago, the sky still dark, the world still sleeping. I teach 5th grade at Lakeside Elementary and prefer arriving early, the quiet hour before chaos letting me prepare for the day ahead. Coffee warming my hands, lesson plans tucked in my messenger bag, mind still fuzzy with sleep. But something stopped me that morning. Across the street, illuminated by the weak glow of a street lamp, sat a German shepherd puppy, perfectly still at the bus stop, as if waiting for the 7:15 downtown route. No frantic pacing, no desperate barking, just patient, dignified waiting. She couldn't have been more than 4 months old, her oversized ears making her head appear too small, her fur dark with moisture. Around her neck, vibrant blue against the muted grays of dawn, was what appeared to be a child's handmade scarf. My body moved before my mind could catch up. Abandoning my coffee on the roof of my car, I crossed the street, snow crunching beneath my boots like tiny bones breaking. The puppy watched my approach without fear, without excitement. Her eyes held something far more complex: expectation. "Hey there," I whispered, crouching slowly. "What are you doing out here alone?" That's when I saw it, a folded paper tucked beneath the scarf, attached to her collar with a plastic clip. My fingers trembled as I carefully removed it, partly from cold, partly from a growing sense that I was about to read something that would break my heart. The note was written in careful block letters, the kind children use when they're trying desperately to make something important look proper. "His name is Sadie. He is very good. Please take care of him. I had no choice, no signature, no explanation." Just 11 words carrying the weight of an impossible decision. "Sadie?" I questioned softly. The puppy's ears perked slightly at the name, and a tremor ran through her small body. Not from cold, but recognition. I realized the writer had mistaken her gender. She leaned into my outstretched hand, her fur damp and cold against my palm. Her tail moved once, twice, not with joy, but with something like relief, as if she'd completed the first part of a mission. I scanned the empty street. Nothing but falling snow and the distant rumble of early traffic. No watching child, no regretful guardian. Just Sadie and me in a moment suspended between abandonment and possibility. "Come on," I said, gathering her into my arms. She was concerningly light, her ribs too prominent beneath my fingers. She didn't struggle, didn't resist. Instead, she pressed her face into my jacket and exhaled a sigh so human it made my throat tighten. "You're safe now," I promised, though I had no right to make such claims. What did I know about keeping a dog? What made me qualified to honor this stranger's plea? Yet something in me recognized that Sadie wasn't just any puppy. Standing there in the snow, her weight in my arms feeling both foreign and familiar, I sensed she was the beginning of something significant. A door opening to a room I didn't know existed. I carried her across the street and into the school, wrapped in an old fleece blanket I kept in my trunk for emergencies. She remained utterly silent, pressed against me, as if afraid I might vanish if she loosened her grip. In my classroom, I turned the space heater toward us and held her close as warmth slowly returned to us both. As the room brightened with morning light, I noticed how she would occasionally glance toward the door, then back at me, assessing, measuring, calculating something I couldn't understand. I kept wondering about the person who had left her. The handwriting suggested a child, and the scarf wasn't something an adult would likely fashion. I imagined small hands tying it around Sadie's neck, perhaps wiping away tears, perhaps whispering promises to return someday. I called the front office and said I'd be starting class late. No explanation offered or requested, one of the benefits of 15 years at the same school. Then I contacted Animal Control, scanning lost dog reports from the past week. Nothing matching Sadie's description. She curled beneath my desk, paws tucked tight against her body, eyes never leaving me. When I'd shift in my chair, she'd lift her head. When I'd speak on the phone, she'd tilt her ears forward. No barking, no whining, just watchful presence, as if she was studying me as carefully as I was studying her. I texted my neighbor, Clara, asking if she could bring some dog food to the school. 20 minutes later, Sadie was eating from a borrowed bowl. Slow, dignified bites despite what must have been gnawing hunger. The careful way she ate, without desperation or greed, told me she'd been loved once. When classes ended that afternoon, I faced a decision. Taking Sadie to a shelter felt impossible after the way she looked at me. Trusting, hopeful, as if I specifically had been chosen for some greater purpose. I'd fostered cats before, but this felt fundamentally different. When we arrived at my townhouse, Sadie hesitated at the threshold. She stood perfectly still, waiting for permission, uncertain if this invitation extended beyond the moment. I knelt down and held out my hand. "It's okay," I said. "This is home now. At least for a while." She stepped forward, her movements deliberate, her tail low but swaying slightly. That night she slept on the floor beside my bed, her head resting against my dangling hand. In 15 years of teaching, I'd learned to recognize the signs of trauma, of fear, of uncertainty, and Sadie carried them all. Yet beneath those layers sat something remarkable. A capacity for trust that defied explanation. I woke the next morning to find her in the exact same position, as if she hadn't moved all night, her gentle breathing the only evidence she wasn't a statue placed there to guard my dreams. For a moment, I simply watched her, the subtle twitching of her paws as she chased something in her sleep, the perfect symmetry of her face, the way her presence had somehow changed the quality of silence in my bedroom, from empty to full. I realized I hadn't slept that deeply in years. At school, Sadie became an instant sensation. My students gasped when they spotted her peeking from my office. "Is that your dog, Professor Mitchell?" they asked, wide-eyed and whispering. "Her name is Sadie," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "She's staying with me for now." By lunch, she had become the unofficial mascot of Lakeside Elementary. The school counselor, Dr. Carlton, stopped by during her free period and knelt beside Sadie, who immediately leaned against her leg as if they'd known each other forever. "This dog has something special," Dr. Carlton murmured. "It's not just gentleness. She sees people." I nodded because I'd felt it too. Sadie didn't merely observe, she witnessed. When Owen, a student who rarely spoke above a whisper, sat beside her during recess, she rested her head on his knee and remained perfectly still. After several minutes, Owen began talking, not to her, but to me, about the novel he was reading. It was the most I'd heard from him in months. That evening, I found myself researching therapy dogs, requirements, training processes, certifications. I had no idea if Sadie could qualify, but something deep within me suspected she was already performing the work without the title. At home, she shadowed me from room to room, never intrusive, but always present. When I cooked dinner, she sat in the kitchen corner, watching with attentive eyes. When I graded papers, she rested beside my chair, her head occasionally brushing against my ankle. I caught myself talking to her about difficult students, about the principal's new initiatives, about my brother's upcoming wedding, and she listened with more genuine interest than most humans I knew. That night, as I turned out the lights, Sadie jumped onto the bed without hesitation. I didn't stop her. Some boundaries I was learning exist only until you realize they shouldn't. By the end of the week, it felt as though Sadie had always been part of Lakeside. She moved through the hallways with quiet confidence, greeting teachers with gentle nudges, sitting beside students who seemed upset or withdrawn. Mr. Ramirez, the head custodian, began saving treats from his lunch specifically for her. The librarian, Mrs. Kwan, allowed her to lie beside the reading circle during story time, a privilege never before granted to any living creature. But the more I watched Sadie integrate herself into the school community, the more I thought about the note, about the child who had written it, who had tied that blue scarf around her neck, who had walked away into the snow. I began making discreet inquiries, careful not to create alarm. I spoke with the bus drivers who covered routes near the school. One of them, Denise, remembered seeing Sadie. "That dog was there almost every morning last week," she said, her voice softening. "Just sitting, watching. I thought she belonged to someone living nearby." I approached Dr. Carlton, asking if any students had recently experienced significant life changes. Moves, family disruptions, behavioral shifts. She gave me several names, but nothing resonated until Friday afternoon, when I noticed a boy named Noah standing alone at the edge of the playground. He wasn't in my class, but his face was familiar from lunch duty. Quiet, perpetually alone. What caught my attention wasn't his solitude. It was the edge of blue fabric visible from his coat pocket, identical in shade to Sadie's scarf. My heart beat faster as I approached him. "Hello." "Noah," I said casually. "That's a nice blue scarf you have." He looked down, startled, like I'd caught him in a secret act. "Thanks," he mumbled. "It matches the one I gave her." I waited, giving him space to continue. "She used to wait for me every morning," he finally said, his voice barely audible over the playground noise. "We'd walk to the bus stop together. But we had to move to the apartments on Westview, and they don't allow pets." His eyes filled with tears. "Mom said we had to give her to the shelter, but I couldn't do that to her. I wanted someone good to find her." I knelt beside him. "You did something incredibly brave, Noah." "Is she okay?" he asked, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "She's more than okay," I smiled. "She's changing lives, including mine. Can I see her just once?" Of course," I nodded. "I think she'd really like that." That weekend, I brought Sadie to the small park near Noah's new apartment complex. I wasn't sure what to expect, whether she would remember him, whether too much had changed in the weeks since their separation. But the moment she spotted him, a small figure in a blue jacket waiting by the swings, her entire body transformed. Her tail began wagging with such force it seemed to propel her forward. She released a single, joyful whine, took 2 hesitant steps, then broke into a full sprint. Noah dropped to his knees, arms outstretched. "Sadie!" he cried. She collided with him like a force of nature, whimpering and wiggling, trying to press herself against every part of him simultaneously. Noah wrapped his arms around her neck and buried his face in her fur, his body shaking with sobs that seemed to contain both grief and relief in equal measure. I turned away, giving them privacy while struggling to maintain my own composure. They remained that way for several minutes, boy and dog reunited, communicating something profound without uttering a single word that human language could capture. Eventually, Noah looked up at me, his face tear-streaked but peaceful. "Thank you for taking care of her," he said simply. "I should be thanking you," I replied. "She's brought so much into my life that I never expected." He smiled, shy but genuine. "I miss her every day, but I'm glad she's not alone." "I miss her every day, but I'm glad she's not alone." "I think," he hesitated, "I think she's supposed to help people. She always knew when I was sad, even when I tried to hide it." I nodded. "She still does that. Every day." Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn plush wrap. "She used to sleep with this," he explained. "Can you keep it with her? So she remembers me." Sadie sniffed the toy, then gently took it in her mouth and placed it carefully at my feet. A gesture so deliberate it seemed almost ceremonial. "I'll make sure she keeps it close," I promised. As we walked back to my car, Sadie kept glancing over her shoulder until Noah was completely out of sight. Then she pressed against my leg and released a deep sigh that seemed to contain the essence of goodbye. But it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like permission to begin something new. Monday morning, Sadie walked into Lakeside Elementary with newfound purpose. Her tail held high, her eyes bright. Noah's plush rabbit clutched gently between her teeth like a badge of office. The students gasped when they saw her. "Sadie brought a toy," someone exclaimed. But she wouldn't relinquish it, carrying it carefully throughout the day, setting it down only when she sensed she was needed. Owen, the quiet boy from my class, asked if Sadie could sit beside his desk during reading time. I agreed. By the end of the hour, he had read an entire chapter aloud to her, his voice growing stronger with each page, as if her presence made the words less intimidating. Later, Zoe came in from recess with tears streaming down her face after an argument with friends. Before I could intervene, Sadie was already moving toward her, Rabbit temporarily forgotten, as she nudged Zoe's hand with her nose. The girl sat on the floor, arms around Sadie's neck, and cried until the storm passed. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but the quiet release of hurt that needed acknowledgement. When Zoe finally stood, her eyes were clearer. She hugged me before returning to class. That Thursday, Principal Winters called me into her office. I entered nervously, uncertain if Sadie's presence had finally crossed some administrative boundary. Instead, the principal handed me a brochure. "Therapy Dog Certification Program," she said simply. "She's already doing the work. We should make it official." I stared at the paper, then at Sadie sitting perfectly poised beside me, head slightly tilted as if she understood every word of our conversation. "She's not even technically mine," I said quietly. Principal Winters smiled. "She belongs somewhere now. That's what matters." That evening I completed the application. The form asked about training, temperament, previous experiences. I didn't have all the answers, but I wrote what I knew to be true, that Sadie possessed an innate gift for connection, that she approached pain without fear, that she somehow understood the difference between sympathy and empathy. As I typed, Sadie lay curled at my feet, Noah's rabbit positioned carefully beside her paw. She looked up occasionally, her tail sweeping once across the floor in gentle encouragement. "We're going to help a lot of people together," I told her. And in that moment, I believed it with complete certainty. The certification process required weeks of evaluation, temperament tests, reactions to unexpected noises, calm behavior around medical equipment, wheelchairs, crutches. Sadie approached each challenge with the same serene focus. The evaluators would try to startle her, confuse her, distract her. But she remained steadfast, as if she'd been preparing for these tests her entire young life. "Are you certain she's a rescue?" one evaluator asked, watching Sadie navigate a room full of potential distractions without a single misstep. "She has the composure of a dog with years of professional training." "She's had her own kind of training," I replied, "just not the conventional sort." When the final approval arrived, I opened the envelope with reverence. Inside was Sadie's official therapy dog badge, her name printed beneath a photo that somehow captured the quiet intelligence behind her eyes. I knelt beside her, attached it to her new vest, and whispered, "You did it, girl." Her tail wagged once, as if to say she'd never doubted the outcome. We began with small visits, the school counseling office, reading intervention groups, the special education classroom. Then we expanded to the children's hospital downtown, where Sadie's impact proved even more profound. I'll never forget our first visit to the pediatric oncology ward. Sadie entered as if she'd memorized the floor plan, moving with gentle confidence past the nurse's station, her nails clicking softly against the polished floor. A boy named Ethan, 7 years old and 3 months into treatment, had been refusing medication for days. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat. His exhausted mother regarding us with the weary skepticism of someone who had seen too many failed interventions. But Sadie needed no instructions. She approached Ethan's bed and simply sat, making no demands, asking for nothing, just offering presence. The boy didn't acknowledge her at first, his face turned resolutely toward the wall. Then, almost imperceptibly, his hand emerged from beneath the blanket. His fingers brushed Sadie's ear, and in a voice raspy from disuse, he whispered, "Hi." His mother's hand flew to her mouth. The attending nurse froze mid-note. Sadie gently rested her head on the edge of the mattress and closed her eyes. Not sleeping, but conveying that she had all the time in the world. It was like watching ice thaw in real time, the subtle shift from rigidity to possibility. Each subsequent visit built upon that foundation. Children who hadn't smiled in weeks began to laugh when Sadie performed her single trick, offering her paw with exaggerated formality. Those struggling with pain found distraction in stroking her fur. Parents who had been maintaining brave faces for months allowed themselves moments of vulnerability, burying their faces in Sadie's neck while she stood perfectly still, absorbing fears too heavy to carry alone. And every evening, when we returned home exhausted and emotionally drained, she would curl up beside me with the same peaceful contentment she'd shown on our first night together, as if carrying others' burdens somehow lightened her own. Word about Sadie began to spread. A local news station ran a feature, "The Bus Stop Guardian: How One Dog is Changing Lives." They interviewed Noah as well, with his mother's permission. He stood proudly beside footage of Sadie, clutching the matching blue scarf, and said with unexpected wisdom, "I didn't give her up. I gave her a mission." That statement lodged in my heart like a splinter of truth, too perfect to remove. Soon we were invited to speak at community centers, other schools, even a residential facility for at-risk youth. Everywhere we went, Sadie created a field of calm around her, not through spectacular feats or clever tricks, but through the radical simplicity of attentive presence. At a teen crisis center, we encountered our greatest challenge. A room full of adolescents with arms crossed and faces masked with practiced indifference. The staff had warned me, don't expect much interaction. These kids have learned not to trust. But Sadie, as always, had her own approach. She walked directly to the furthest corner, where a boy sat alone, hood pulled low over his face, body turned away from the group. She lay down near his feet, curled into a loose circle, and closed her eyes, not sleeping, but eliminating any pressure he might feel to respond. Minutes passed in silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, the boy's hand moved downward, coming to rest lightly on Sadie's side. No one commented. No one made a fuss. But I saw how his shoulders lowered slightly, how his breathing deepened. Small signals that something frozen had begun, however slightly, to thaw. These moments accumulated like beads on a string, each one small in isolation, but together forming something beautiful and substantial. Not just with children, either. After a session at the hospital, we stopped at a park to rest. An elderly man sat alone on a bench, tears sliding unchecked down his weathered face as he clutched what appeared to be a photograph. Sadie approached without my guidance, sitting quietly beside him. He looked at her, then at me, his voice breaking as he spoke. "She looks just like my Bella. Lost her last month after 15 years together. Didn't think I'd feel anything good again." He reached down tentatively. Sadie leaned into his touch, her eyes half closed, her body completely still. In that moment, I understood what made her extraordinary. Not just that she brought comfort, but that she somehow returned to people something they believed irretrievably lost. Connection, hope, the possibility of joy. That winter was particularly harsh, with storms rolling across the Midwest in waves of white fury. Schools closed frequently, roads became impassable, and the city seemed to hold its breath beneath a blanket of silence. But Sadie thrived in the snow, bounding through drifts in the backyard with inexplicable delight, her paws leaving perfect imprints, like stamps of approval on the pristine surface. During a particularly severe blizzard, the power grid failed across our neighborhood. My townhouse grew dark and cold, despite the emergency generator's efforts. I lit candles, wrapped myself in layers of blankets, and sat on the floor beside the fireplace. Sadie positioned herself next to me, her body radiating more heat than seemed physically possible for her size. Noah's rabbit lay nearby, always within her sight, as if it represented a promise she intended to keep. Looking at her in the flickering candlelight, I felt a surge of gratitude so intense it bordered on pain. Before Sadie, I had lived in a house, not a home, returning each evening to silence, to the echoing absence of connection. But now, I came home to her, to her quiet greeting at the door, to the soft click of her nails on hardwood, to the weight of her head resting on my knee as I read. Small sounds, small comforts, yet they had fundamentally altered the texture of my existence. The following day, despite treacherous conditions, we made our way to the children's hospital. Certain commitments, I had learned, transcend inconvenience. In the pediatric oncology wing, a new patient had arrived, a 9-year-old girl named Maya, recently diagnosed, frightened, withdrawn. She had refused to speak since admission, turning away from doctors, parents, and staff alike. When we entered her room, Maya was curled toward the wall, her small body forming a question mark beneath the blankets. Sadie approached the bed with characteristic gentleness, sitting at a respectful distance, making no demands. No response came that day, or the next, but on our third visit, as Sadie assumed her now familiar position, Maya whispered without turning, "Is she real?" "Yes," I answered softly. "Very real." "She looks like the dog from my dreams," Maya said, slowly rotating to face us. "The one who sits outside my window and keeps the monsters away." Sadie moved closer, her movements deliberate and fluid, and rested her chin on the edge of the mattress. Maya's hand, thin and pale from treatment, reached out to touch Sadie's head. A smile transformed her face, brief but genuine, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. From that moment, Sadie became Maya's constant companion during treatments. She would lie beside the bed during chemotherapy sessions, rest her head on Maya's lap when nausea struck, sometimes simply breathing in rhythm with the girl, slow, steady inhalations and exhalations that seemed to anchor Maya when pain threatened to sweep her away. "When I get scared," Maya confided one afternoon, "I hold her ear. It's so soft, makes the scary things smaller somehow." I nodded, unable to speak around the tightness in my throat. Weeks passed. Maya's condition improved. The day she left the hospital, in remission, though with regular treatment still ahead, Sadie walked beside her wheelchair all the way to the exit. Maya leaned down and pressed her face against Sadie's head. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being my courage." That evening, sitting on my porch watching the sunset paint the snow-covered yards in shades of pink and gold, I studied Sadie, her head resting contentedly on my foot, her eyes half closed in quiet satisfaction. She had carried so many. Children in hospitals, teenagers in crisis, elderly people with fresh grief, and me, a teacher who had forgotten how to connect. She asked for nothing in return. No recognition, no reward. She simply gave, and in giving, created ripples of healing that extended far beyond her immediate presence. I still drive past that bus stop occasionally, the place where I first saw her sitting in the snow, wearing a blue scarf and carrying a note that changed the trajectory of my life. I slowed down, studying the bench, the sign, the patch of sidewalk where she waited with such patience. In memory, I can still see her there, not with pity, but with wonder at the faith it took for Noah to believe that someone worthy would find her, that the world still contained enough kindness to honor his plea. I think about Noah often. He visits Sadie every few weeks now, his mother having recognized the therapeutic value of maintaining their connection. He's growing taller, laughing more easily. During his last visit, he brought Sadie a new collar, green to match the spring buds beginning to appear on the trees. She wore it with the same quiet dignity with which she wore everything, even her official therapy vest. People often ask if I rescued Sadie. The truth renders such a question almost comical. She rescued me, along with countless others. She pulled me from a life that had grown increasingly narrow and isolated, expanding it into something rich with purpose and connection. She transformed silence into conversation, emptiness into fulfillment, routine into mission. She reminded me that healing rarely announces itself with trumpets and proclamations. More often, it arrives quietly on four paws, curls up beside you without fanfare, and simply stays, steady and unwavering through storms both literal and metaphorical. I couldn't have known that snowy morning how profoundly one German Shepherd puppy would alter everything. But now, each time Sadie walks into a room and someone's face brightens with hope, I remember the bus stop, the scarf, the note, the moment when abandonment transformed into possibility. I remember a child who loved enough to let go, trusting that the universe might still be fundamentally kind. And I try, in ways both small and significant, to prove worthy of that trust. Because somewhere right now, someone else is saying goodbye to something precious, hoping it lands in gentle hands. And because of Sadie, her quiet courage, her boundless capacity for connection, I've learned that sometimes, against all odds, it does. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment sharing your own experiences with the animals who've changed your life. Your stories help build a community of people who understand the profound impact our four-legged companions can have. Thank you for being part of this journey, and please subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary bond between humans and dogs.